My name is Nick Torrey. I'm an attorney at the Southern Environmental Law Center, and we represent groups all over the Southeast who work to protect public health, clean air, and clean water. And I'll tell you a little bit about a bunch of lawsuits that we're involved in on coal ash. Our legal work on coal ash began in South Carolina, actually, where we filed lawsuits that have resulted in two utilities committing to remove over 13 million tons of coal ash from unlined pits on the banks of rivers, in wetlands, all throughout the state. So in the Carolinas now, 2 out of the 3 utilities are doing the right thing, and Duke is the odd man out. So in North Carolina, we have gone to court at the state and federal level to represent community groups, environmental groups, conservation groups all throughout the state to force Duke Energy to stop polluting our rivers and our drinking water and start cleaning up its coal ash. And I'll tell you about the cases that are furthest along first. We're working with groups who work primarily on coal ash sites around Charlotte, in Asheville, and in Wilmington. And there, in those sites, we gave notice of our intent to go to federal court and sue Duke Energy to stop them from polluting in this way illegally, leaching all these metals and toxics out of the unlined lagoons that they have. And as you may have heard, the state filed its own lawsuits to try to block us from going to federal court. Turned around and proposed a sweetheart settlement deal with Duke Energy. And so what we did was to intervene, to stick our noses into those state lawsuits to make sure that Duke was held accountable and that the local communities had a voice in what happens to their water. As a result of doing that, we're starting to see some encouraging results. So, as Sarah mentioned in the first panel, near Wilmington, the Flemington community is a low-income area near one of Duke's coal ash sites, and their drinking water wells are being threatened by Duke's coal ash pollution. So we drew attention to that issue with our court filings by getting public attention on it, and Duke has now committed to provide a new water supply to that low-income community to protect it from Duke's own coal ash. And that's a step in the right direction. Duke is still poisoning the groundwater, though, and a popular local fishing site. So there's a lot of work still to be done. We objected, of course, to the proposed sweetheart settlement that you may have heard about also. And almost 5,000 of you did the same. That would have set the template for how coal ash was dealt with in these legal proceedings throughout the state. It applied to a couple of sites, but it was going to be the model, and it would have allowed Duke to pay a nominal fine and to avoid, you did not require Duke to clean up the pollution, and instead required it only to study the pollution.
Hold. I just want folk to hear that everywhere. So say that again about this sweetheart settlement.
Sure. It was a sweetheart settlement deal, and we call it that, and a lot of other people called it that for a very simple reason. They cooked it up almost immediately after the state stepped in to try to block our federal lawsuits by filing its own state lawsuits, and what it did was allow Duke to pay pocket change for you and me, a nominal fine, and to simply study the pollution. That's what the settlement required. Didn't require them to stop polluting, didn't require them to clean up the pollution. So, the good news is that after everything that's happened, a lot of arguing in court, a lot of national attention and drama, finally, the state has abandoned that sweetheart settlement and walked away from it. So that's one roadblock out of the way, and that's a good thing. The state court also recently ruled for us that North Carolina's groundwater laws mean what they say, and that what they say is that Duke must take immediate action to remove the source of the groundwater pollution at its coal ash sites. We plan to use this ruling to call for prompt removal of the coal ash from Duke's lagoons across the state. Now, I mentioned that Duke and the state tried to block us from going to federal court. They tried, but it didn't work. We still went to federal court, and we filed 2 federal lawsuits. And in both of those, we're fighting it out with them, but a couple good things have happened. Duke has tried in several of those cases to delay them, to put them on hold while it tries to manage its problems at the state level. And in both of those cases, the presiding judges have rejected Duke's arguments and sided with our requests to proceed with all deliberate speed towards a resolution of those cases under the Clean Water Act. Back in state court earlier this year, before the spill, we, on behalf of 7 community and conservation groups around the state, asked to intervene to do what those earlier groups had done as well, and join in that state lawsuit so that all the other sites throughout North Carolina would also get the scrutiny that they deserve, and that Duke would be forced to clean up its mess. Those sites are in Chatham County near Chapel Hill, where I live, in Shelby, in Lumberton, in Salisbury, Winston-Salem, and in Goldsboro. Finally, just this month, we filed yet another motion to intervene, asking permission for 4 more local groups, these ones focused on the Dan River, to join in that state suit to make sure that Duke is required to clean up the Dan River site. Not just the spill, but also the Dan River Lagoon for years has been leaking water and leaking toxic pollutants, contaminated water, I should have said, and toxic pollutants out into the environment. And the state has known about it since at least the 1990s and done nothing. So we are trying to get that coal ash cleaned up. At the end of the day, all these different legal actions are really about one thing, which is that Duke must stop polluting our water and endangering our communities with its coal ash. We're going to continue to push for Duke to be required to do what the utilities in South Carolina are already doing today, get the coal ash out of leaking dangerous lagoons to protect our rivers, our drinking water, and all of our communities. Thanks.
Now, you mentioned that you had every time you would file, there would be a reaction, like in physics, an equal opposite. Every action has an equal opposite reaction. And you were kind of, talking away from the mic because you're so cool with this green towel. And by the way, I want to...
Thank you.
By the way, I want to borrow it one day, okay? But I want you to get right in the mic, because folk need to understand now, who was filing these, I know, like when you would do something, because I'm quite sure it wasn't people we elected. It wasn't the government with our own money filing stuff to stop stuff from protecting us. I'm trying to figure out who's with us. Us real confused. So who? It
was real confusing. Under the Clean Water Act, citizens can sue polluters themselves. They don't have to wait for the state regulators who may have been sitting around for a while to do it, but they do have to give notice. They have to say to the polluter, we're going to sue you if you don't stop. And they also have to say that to the state regulators. Say, we're going to do this. And they have to give them 60 days notice. In South Carolina, when we did this, the state did not step in to impede what we were up to. But in North Carolina...
So we got to get... Now, in South Carolina, where the governor's been against everything, even talking about against you, and where they still fly the Confederate flag. When you all filed in South Carolina, the government, which is us, right? See, let's don't, we the people, we're the government. Am I right? We vote, we elect, we pay tax, we're the government. So in South Carolina, and please don't tell me that North Carolina did something worse than South Carolina.
Oh yeah.
No.
That's one of the worst parts about this, is it makes it, we look bad next to South Carolina.
Flag. South Carolina flies the Confederate flag. Please don't. Okay, go ahead. So tell me what happened.
But we came up to North Carolina. So we did those couple cases down in South Carolina. We came up to North Carolina, and we had a very different experience. We would send one of these notice letters. 60 days is the period, so nothing would happen. We'd get ready to file our federal lawsuit. Day 59 out of 60, at about 5:30 in the afternoon, the state of North Carolina, and North Carolina Diener, represented by the North Carolina Department of Justice, would file an enforcement action.
What was that?
Enforcement action.
Okay.
And in some situations, that might be okay if they were going to enforce. But what happened was, we did the first letter, they blocked us on the 59th day. We did the second one, they blocked us on the 59th day. We did the third one, and we think we spooked them, because on that 59th day, they didn't just file as to one more site, they filed as to all 12 of the remaining sites in the state to try to wrap everything up in a global action and presumably a global settlement. So once they filed those things, it was a very short period of time before they came out with this prepackaged deal with Duke to essentially do nothing.
And when was all this going on?
This past year, that's right. 2013, we sent the first...
Oh, you mean the same time that the legislature was passing all these extremist stuff, and McCrory's in office, who used to work for Duke and Powell?
That's exactly right.
And on the 59th day, most of the time. Now,
each and every time, yeah.
I'm being a little facetious because I'm mad, but I have to do this to keep from saying some stuff. Because it's hard for me to keep saying coal ash. I want to say something else. Because I have always been but I'm not going there, But it makes you upset. So here you are filing a lawsuit to protect us. And then in our name, see, because it says the state of North Carolina.
That's right.
Who's in the state of North Carolina? Raise your hand. Now, let me see your hand, because they said y'all were a bunch of outsiders. Okay. So that means in your name, it doesn't say McCrory up there. It doesn't say Berger. It doesn't say Tillis. It doesn't say, what's your other representative? It says the state of North Carolina. So in essence, we've elected people, who've appointed people, who, when this guy is trying to protect us, those who have been elected by us then step in and use us to keep the protection we're trying to get for us.
And I'll say one more thing. Don't quote me on this, but I think at the Southern Environmental Law Center, we do a lot of these kind of Clean Water Act cases, and I'm a young guy, but my understanding is that in the past, when we've done this with all the previous administrations prior to the McCrory administration, we never encountered this behavior. 59th day, stepping in.
Yeah. That's serious. And if we put this is why we have to stay together. Those we care about voting rights, we care about environmental rights, education, because the same group of extremists have driven our education funding lower than Mississippi. That's bad. They passed a voting suppression law that has pieces in it worse than South Carolina and Alabama. And now, I preached under that Confederate flag 3 times. I know it's there. And for you to tell me that the government in North Carolina has done something over the last year that's more regressive than South Carolina, if that doesn't make you want to mobilize and organize and march and vote and litigate and fight and stand up like you've never before, I don't know what else